The Olympic Games were my introduction to sports. At the tender age of 6 years old, I was watching a lot of the Olympics from Los Angeles in 1984. My mom got me into them. We would root for Team USA in almost everything, and because countries like the Soviet Union and the German Democratic Republic weren't around to take any medals, the US dominated the games entirely. As years gone by, I've still tuned into the Olympic Games over the last 40 years. With the exception of the Sydney Olympics in 2000, I was able to sit down and watch as much as I possibly could. In 2002, I was furloughed from my job for 2 months. During that time were the 2002 Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake City. During the 2002 Olympics, I began to come up with something called the Olympic commentary. You'd be shocked that the first one was not about the Paris figure skating scandal with the Canadians and the Russians, but it was about a Korean skater getting disqualified in a short track race that allowed Apollo Anton Ono to win the gold medal. I rattled off a quick 45-second blurb that I will not repeat on this video, and that is where the Olympic commentary was born. Over the next 20 years, I would write blurbs and essays and thoughts about the Olympic Games. I even had an OC history lesson in 2014 talking about 30 years after the Olympics in Sarajevo in 1984. On top of that, for the Tokyo Olympics, I did a diary of an armchair Olympian where I wrote quick journal entries for each day of the Olympic Games in Tokyo, Japan. I also came up with something called Stupid Stuff on the Internet for 2018, 2021, and 2022. Just some things I found on the internet because people are crazy now. I've decided to make a video out of one of my Olympic commentaries. This goes back to 2022 when I read an article by a sports writer named Dan Wetzel. Wetzel had the crazy idea that the men's ice hockey tournament should be moved to the summer games so the NHL players could participate in it. I read his article and then I wrote an Olympic commentary countering every single point he made. So for your viewing and listening pleasure, I present to you the Olympic commentary. And now, it's the Olympic commentary. I've decided to give the Olympic hack Dan Wetzel more attention than he should be getting. This was an article he wrote on February 16, 2022, saying the men's ice hockey event should be moved to the Summer Olympics. So I'm going to read most of this trash, and I'm going to respond to almost every point he makes that's wrong. Ready? No? Too bad. Let's start going down this hill faster than a Swiss alpine skier.
The Olympics have a men's hockey problem. It isn't very good.
Actually, in the last 30 years where the NHL wasn't involved in a men's hockey tournament, they've been pretty good. The 1994 gold medal game went to a shootout. 2018, the gold medal game went to overtime, with the Russians beating the Cinderella Germans. 2022 had Finland ending their long gold medal drought for the first time since competing in ice hockey in 1952. Even the United States made an unlikely fourth-place finish in 1992.
That is said with all due respect to former NHLers, career EuroLeaguers, and college kids who play as hard and as well as they possibly can to represent their countries. This isn't even their fault. Part of the low quality at play stems from the fact that these guys were thrown together on makeshift teams, given about 3 practices, and told to hit the global stage.
Did you think that the players taken from the NHL had time to practice and congeal together? No, they didn't. The teams were usually announced around the holiday season, and then they were told to fly off to Nagano, Salt Lake City, Turin, Vancouver, or Sochi.
The IOC, true to its well-established arrogance, has always taken the position that the National Hockey League needs the Olympics and thus must bend to its schedule. In truth, the IOC needs the NHL, which should be one of the marquee events of the Games and has been a breathtaking exhibition of skill and passion, is an afterthought, even as it enters the semi-final rounds in Beijing when the best in the world aren't there.
Actually, the IOC doesn't need the NHL. That message was made crystal clear to the league in 2016, which I'll go into further detail momentarily. Also, the men's hockey tournament has never been the marquee event during primetime coverage on network TV. The events that have been shown heavily are alpine skiing, figure skating, speed skating, sledding, and extreme sports. On the list of what to care about the most, hockey is probably outside of the top 5. The best in the world were allowed to compete at that tournament. Just because a bunch of millionaires from a professional hockey league in North America weren't there, that didn't diminish the value.
The IOC should listen to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and move the men's tournament to the Summer Olympics during the league's off-season, when participation will be assured and preparation maximized. Bettman has reportedly lobbied the IOC for this since the 1990s, only to be rebuffed. That should change.
Gary Bettman is still the commissioner? I rarely see him anymore. Anyway, are you aware of how many sports and events take place during the Summer Olympics? I'll rattle off some team sports that are held during the Summer Games. Handball, basketball, volleyball, field hockey, water polo, football, rugby sevens, and in the case for the Tokyo Games, baseball and softball. The schedule is crowded and ice hockey would get lost in the shuffle. It's a terrible proposition that I flat out reject.
The NHL skipped in 2018 due to time and scheduling constraints associated with the location in South Korea. It initially was headed to the 2022 Beijing Games, but pulled out citing restrictive COVID policies and other scheduling issues.
Actually, those weren't the main reasons the NHL skipped out in 2018. They skipped out because the league didn't want to take a break for the Olympics. On top of that, the IOC told the NHL that they no longer would pay for the travel, insurance, and accommodation costs for the players. So there was no one winning on either side. I did have a solution to this problem in 2017. Have the players that want to go to the games contribute a small portion of their game checks to cover the costs. Those that did would be considered because they paid their fair share. As for the 2022 Olympics, the NHL had to shut down the league for a week during the 2021 holiday season because of an outbreak of another COVID variant. The league had to make up the games somehow without stretching the season further. In fact, NHL participation in Beijing wasn't set in stone. If COVID got out of hand like it did in the first weeks of December, pulling out of the competition was the only plan B the league had. That was to ensure any games missed would be made up during the duration of the Olympics.
It is, as of now, committed to the 2026 Olympics in Italy, but who really knows? The NHL makes an enormous sacrifice to suspend its season so it can participate. It remains forever hesitant.
The Continental Hockey League chose to end their season early and start the playoffs after the Olympics ended. The NHL wasn't the only league that would have sacrificed their season.
It's the players who push for this. A number, most vocally the Boston Bruins' Brad Marchand, railed about not getting to go to Beijing, even with the protocols and isolation risk.
Brad Marchand and a few NHL players are in the minority. The rest of the league and the coaches saw this as a blessing in disguise. Victor Hedman was all for defending the Stanley Cup with the Lightning in June rather than play a quick tournament in February. Winnipeg Jets goalie Connor Hellebuck looked ahead to 2026. Who cares what Brad Marchand thinks?
The desire of the best in the world to compete in this tournament has always translated to the ice. The Olympics are a dream, not just a marketing or branding opportunity. The intensity of play has been incredible. The knockout round is a series of Game 7s. The blood, sweat, and tears of this tournament are second to none. Seeing the best of the best paired off and full of nationalistic pride is what the Olympics are supposed to represent, so make it for men's hockey.
I'll say it again in case you didn't hear me the first time. Over the last 30 years, I've seen great Olympic tournaments with the NHL, and I've seen great Olympic tournaments without the NHL.
Hockey is obviously a winter sport, and the Winter Olympics are about competitions played on some form of frozen water, be it ice or snowflakes. However, this is about the realities of scheduling, not philosophy. The women's tournament should remain in the Winter Olympics, where, due to the absence of the men, it can get even more attention and perhaps add more games or teams.
Since 1998, I really don't invest too much of my time watching the women's hockey tournament. The main reason? The women's tournament isn't all that interesting. It's always been the same two teams and everybody else. With the exception of 2006, it's always been the US and Canada playing for the gold. It doesn't need more attention, it needs more teams to step their game up and make that tournament interesting. As far as the realities of scheduling, feel free to ask the European leagues that were happy as hens that the NHL stayed out. The players from their leagues got recognition from me during that time.
Putting men's hockey in the summer allows for everyone to be available to play, often rested and ready. It also lets national teams run training camps and exhibition tours to get into top shape. The level of play and the hype heading into the Olympics should increase.
You don't get the length of an NHL season, do you, Danny boy? A brutal 82-game gauntlet. Whoever wins the Stanley Cup would have played a minimum of 16 games and a maximum of 28 extra games. I might add that these playoff games have the possibility to go to an extra overtime period or 5. If a team wins the Stanley Cup, their offseason is a mere 3 months before the team returns to training camp. So you want a bunch of players to take time away from their offseason to train, practice, and play in a tournament that's going to get buried under many other sports at the Summer Olympics? I don't think so.
There is an argument that hockey would get lost in the crowded summer games, especially competing with the NBA Rich Men's Basketball Tournament, but overall, audiences are bigger in the summer and hockey should never shy away from competition when it comes to showcasing itself.
Dan, what did I just say earlier? In the United States, when it comes to the Olympic viewing audience, hockey would be competing with basketball, swimming, track and field, gymnastics, extreme sports, diving, soccer, rowing, archery, water polo, judo, boxing, tennis, table tennis, wrestling, and beach volleyball. For the 2024 Summer Olympics, there will be 32 sports on the schedule. That is way too crowded. The Winter Olympics for 2026 will have half of that. 16 sports, including a new event called ski mountaineering. But as far as ice hockey showcasing itself at the Summer Olympics, it's not going to happen. I now jump to the final paragraph of this horrendous hot take.
That's the kind of tournament the players want, the fans covet, and the sport deserves. And it is what the Olympics, currently bleeding television viewers amidst weakening relevance, especially in North America, needs as well. Bettman is correct on this. Men's hockey in the summer is a good deal for the IOC, for the NHL, so let's make it happen.
Me personally, I don't care. As I said earlier, since the early 90s, I've tuned into Olympic hockey regardless of NHL participation. I was entertained. I saw heavyweights like the Russians and Team Canada win gold. I've seen incredible underdog stories like the 1992 US team make an unlikely semifinal appearance, the 1998 Czech Republic team eliminating a fully stacked Team Canada and go on to win gold, the 2018 Germans winning a silver medal. Putting the men's ice hockey tournament during the Summer Olympics is a lousy idea. If this is the best idea to grow the game, this isn't the way to go. Any brainlet who dares proposes this to the IOC should be laughed out of the room, laughed off a Zoom call, and laughed off the internet. Oh, Bettman suggested this? How did this guy get in the Hall of Fame again? What a horrible article. Mr. Wetzel, what you've written is probably the stupidest thing I've read on the internet for any kind of sports ball competition. I personally felt my IQ slowly slip downward every time I had to stop and dispute your points in this tire fire of an article. I don't ever want you writing anything about the Olympics ever again because you truly, madly, deeply suck at it. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.